Alright, in this problem we are going to use a proportion to solve this word problem. So if you remember from the other video about proportion basics, the proportion is two equal ratios. Two equal ratios form a proportion. So here we have, Jack is making cookies. The recipe is using calls for 2 cups of flour to make 24 cookies. He needs to make 80 cookies. How many cups of flour will he need for a recipe that makes 80 cookies? So we have some information, but not all the information that we need to answer this question, so we have to figure it out. So important information here, the recipe he's using calls for 2 cups of flour to make 24 cookies. So we have 2 cups of flour. That's going to help us figure out how much flour we need for 80. 2 cups of flour makes 24 cookies. Okay, we need to figure out how many cups of flour we need for 80 cookies. So, I'm going to also just underline this question. Okay, so using a proportion can be used to solve so many different types of problems. This is a good example, I think, because a lot of us cook and we like to increase recipes in case we want to make more, and who doesn't want to make more cookies? Alright, so first thing you want to ask yourself in solving this problem, or any problem that you're going to use a proportion to solve, or any problem that's dealing with two things, maybe even three, but for now we're going to just do two, is you want to ask yourself, what are the two things I'm dealing with here? What are the two things I need to work with to figure out the answer to the problem? So in this word problem, I've got cups and I've got cookies. And it's cups of flour, but we can just use cups and cookies. So I know that I'm going to be dealing with cups to cookies. Now, I wrote it like a ratio because I'm going to use ratios and proportions to solve the problem. So cups to cookies is what I'm comparing. So cups to cookies, that is equal to, now I'm making a proportion, 2 cups, right? The 2 would go with cups, right across from cups. 2 would go with cups. I should say right next to cups. 2. And then cookies, the number is 24. So 2 to 24. Cups to cookies is 2 to 24. Now, in order to figure out how many I need for 80, set up the part of the proportion that I know. So I need 80 cookies. So 80 will go along the line with cookies. So 80 goes down here. So you're taking the information and you're matching it up with what it goes with. So we've got cups and cookies, and we know we need 2 cups for 24 cookies. So you're just setting it up in a way that's kind of organizing the information in a smaller format than all of this wording. So now I have 2 cups, 24 cookies, 80 cookies. How many cups? So I put an X right there, because an X is an unknown number. We call it a variable. And this is going to be good practice for algebra, which is the next discipline. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that you can solve this. You can ask yourself, okay, well, what times 24 equals 80? And there's not a pretty number there. So I know that 24 can't multiply by any whole number to get to 80, because I know 24 doesn't divide evenly into 80. So what I'm going to use in this problem is cross multiplication. Cross multiplication, if you remember from the other video of proportion basics, it's the cross products. So I'm going to use cross products to solve this problem. So I'm going to cross multiply. So I like to do just kind of like a big multiplication sign. And then I like to do the little arrows to point to the numbers that are being multiplied together. Okay, so we have 24 times x. 24 times x is written just like this. Now, this is a good thing to remember because most of the time, when you were writing multiplication, you would write a little x in between the two numbers or a dot in between the two numbers. But when you're multiplying variables, you write that variable right next to the number. That's just the notation that's used in algebra. So if you ever see this, you know that that means 24 multiplied by x. Okay, so now 24 multiplied by x equals 80 times 2. Okay, so 2, that's a cross product. So this right here has to equal this, because the laws of proportion say that the cross products are equal. And in order for them to be equal, this x has to be a number that would make this equal to this. So now I still don't know what x is, so I'm going to keep going. I've still got 24x. Now I have 80 times 2. I know that 80 times 2 is 160. 2 times 0 is 0, and 2 times 8 is 16. So equals 160. So now I have to divide. I'm going to divide using a fraction. Well, I'm going to get a fraction from my division problem. Oh, the reason you have to divide, I might want to talk about that too. Okay, this is a lot of information I understand in this problem, so try to bear with me. Now, in order to solve for x, so you want to figure out what x is. In order to do that, you have to know what 24 is being multiplied by to equal 60. So 24 times what equals 60? So let's just put this over here as a separate little thing. 24 times what number equals 160? So if you think back to fact families, if this times this equals 160, then 160 divided by this equals 24, and 160 divided by 24 equals x. That is those fact families I think you learned in, I don't know, primary, elementary, one of those, first, second, third, or fourth grade. These are really important to remember and to understand that this times this equals this, which also means this divided by either one of these equals the other one. Okay, so back to over here, since we are wanting to figure out what x is, then we're going to do 160 divided by 24. Now, in algebra, when you're solving for a variable, whatever you do to one side of the equation, this is one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other side of the equal sign. So I know that we're going to be dividing 160 by 24, and I'm going to write it this way, divided by 24. Remember, all fractions are division problems, and when we're doing algebra and we're working with proportions, we're using a lot of fraction type notation. So this means 160 divided by 24. And since I have to do it on the other side, I'm going to do 24x divided by 24. Now, if you were to look at this, and this is basically 24 times something divided by 24. So you want to be left with just x. So this is 24 divided by 24, which equals just 1. So 1x is just x. So now this, I like to put a big 1 in the middle because 24 divided by 24 equals 1. And then you're left with x, because it's equals 1 times x. And then you have 160 divided by 24. So top number in the house, remember, 160 divided by 24. Okay, well, 24 doesn't go into 1, and it doesn't go into 16. Ay. Let's see. Well, I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times, because 4 quarters equals $1. And so maybe this will go in 6 times, because 2 more quarters would be $1.50. So I'm going to try it times 6. 24 times 6. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2. 6 times 2 is 12. 13, 14. That looks right, because you can't do another 24. I would have too much if I did another 24. Yeah, then I would go over. So I know it's got to be 6. 6, and then I'm going to subtract 144. Turn that into a 5 and that into a 10. 1 and 16. So my answer, I think about 5 minutes ago, I told you I was going to make a fraction out of this. So this is 6 and 16/24. Remember, the whole number is the answer. So x equals 6 and 16/24. Now, this part can be reduced. So now I can also say that x, barely have enough room down there, equals 6. And I know that 16 can be divided by 2. I know that most people like to just start with 2. And so that's 8. 24 divided by 2 is 12. And I know that 8 and 12 can still both be divided by 2. So I'm going to keep going. 4, 6. And those can still be divided by 2 as well. Any even number can be divided by 2. So now I have 2 over 3. So this is 6 and 2/3. So we'll go back to our question. How many cups of flour will we need for the recipe that makes 80 cookies? Is 6 and 2/3 cups of flour, which is nice because measuring cups come in thirds, so that works. 6 and 2/3 cups flour. This is like the one time I won't make you write full sentences, but you gotta write what this number is for. You gotta write cups of flour. This is the answer to the question. Woo! Yay!